Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2023 Leading Transformational Change Forum. I'm so excited to be here and I'm so excited to see all of you. My name is Salima Hemani and I am the president of SZH Consulting. We are a management consulting firm based in the Washington, D.C. area, focusing on organizational development and effectiveness. I'm also the proud member of the Consortium for Change. And I am deeply excited about the topic for this session, which I think is incredibly relevant given the level of chaos and complexity that surrounds us at a level and scale that has not been experienced before. I'm also very excited to hear from our presenter for this session, Cailin O'Riordan. In addition to being a fellow C4C member, Cailin is a seasoned executive coach, specializing in guiding leaders to navigate complex, dynamic, and uncertain business environments. With a background in academia and a history of executive roles, Cailin has coached CEOs, founders, and senior executives, elevating their leadership capabilities and organizational effectiveness. Clients who work with Cailin appreciate her adeptness at fostering critical and creative thinking in navigating intricate challenges. In addition to her independent consulting practice, Cailin co-founded Collective Wisdom Coaches, which is an expert network designed to provide clients with like-minded coaching approaches and methodologies at scale. So without any further delay, I will now hand it over to Cailin.
Thank you, Salima. So appreciate your moderation and time and efforts through this process. So as Salima mentioned, people are living extremely multifaceted, complicated lives. And sometimes those lives and the roles they play are so intertwined that it's difficult to figure out where to put their time, their energy, and their attention. And as a result, some people are feeling torn and disintegrated in some ways, off balance in some ways, more than they would like to be. And people are genuinely trying to be focused, present, and at their best, and they're trying so many different things to do it. But they've got different roles that they're playing in their lives. So some people are taking care of their elderly parents, and so they've got a caretaking role. Other people have young children, and they're managing all the joys and complexities that come with raising little kids while you're also trying to perhaps do something in your professional career. People might be struggling with something with their health or the health of someone that they love. They may also be managing loss. And multiple types of loss simultaneously. They may be in a downturn where they're having to let many people go, and the burden that they carry with that and handling those conversations correctly can make them feel, torn apart in some ways. And I think being able to come up with ways of thinking, almost a mindset or a mentality in those moments so that you can reintegrate and be present and be at your very best in the ways that you need to be, in the ways that call on you, is really a compelling question that everyone seems to be asking themselves. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. That's the focus of our time and our effort in our conversation. One of the things that comes to mind when we talk about the barrage of life, which is all of those things coming at you, and a throughput to that, is thinking about how are we going to actually hold integrity through that process? How are we going to feel in congruence with ourselves and with our environments? And for some people, you'll hear the phrase like, honesty is the best policy, right? Or, if you do right by you, then you're going to do right by the situation, or something along the lines of what my son, who's famous in our household, his second grade teacher, Mrs. Wong, God love her, would always put her hand on her heart and say, if you've done your best in here, then that's all you need to abide by, right? And so that's the saying in the family now, put your hand on your heart and have you done the best, by yourself. I think that's an amazing way to think about integrity, and I think it holds. I also would add to that that integrity is sometimes structural, if you will, within yourself. And so if you think about the foundation of a house, if it has integrity, the rest of the house holds. If it doesn't, it crumbles. And so when you think about holding your integrity for yourself so that you are coming into those moments that matter, being fully aware, focused, present, and yourself, and comfortable in your own skin, how do you go about doing that? People talk about different things in this space. They talk about renewing your energy physically, eating well, sleeping well, all those kinds of things. They talk about staying connected with your spirituality, if you're a person of faith or if you get your spirituality in different ways. They talk about emotional energy, having fun, spending time with the people you love. They talk about mental, and intellectual. All of those things matter. And if that framework helps you, that's wonderful. I think you need to think about all those parts coming together so that they hold. However, it really comes down to how you're able to gain perspective, the speed with which you do it, the areas in which you do it. And like this owl sort of staring back at us, he's looking things head on, seems very in the moment. He's higher up looking down, so he has that perspective for himself and he's comfortable where he's at. This is almost the gold standard that we're trying to achieve when we are literally managing things from every direction, from home, from work, and from community, and all the facets that you're involved in life. So when we put this together, we want to think about how do you manage the barrage of your life that is a norm to be chaotic in this day and time, and hold yourself and live your life and lead in your role with integrity. I want to give you a couple ways of thinking about that. So when you think about the constant in your life, relationships are pretty close to being the only constant across every single facet of your life. You have a relationship with yourself, you have a relationship with your team, with your board, if you're a CEO, you've got a relationship with your investors, you've got relationships with your kids, with your parents, and it goes on from there. There just isn't one avenue or walk of life where you're not in a relationship with someone. And the question is, what are those triggers that unbalance you the most consistently in your relationships? The goal is to get really aware and identify what those things are. Some people know them right off the bat. If I ask them that question, they can literally name, oh, I take things personally. That's my trigger. And when I take things personally, I lose all sense of balance. I can't think clearly, and I just go on the defensive. If you don't know what that trigger is for yourself, if you don't have a gut reaction, you can't name it, spend some time being a scientist of yourself, right? Pay attention to all the wealth of assessments that most companies run for you. All of those, the entire objective of all of those mechanisms is to get you aware of what it is that triggers you in relationships. And I would probably bet that for a lot of people, that thing that triggers them is consistent across both their personal lives, their professional lives, the way they interface with their communities. And so that's one thing for us to consider. How do you figure out what that is, get an awareness of it, and then come up with some strategies or ways to think about gaining perspective so you can reset? The whole process is to gain the perspective. How do you gain perspective? Who helps you gain perspective? Where do you need to be to gain perspective? The background behind me is not fake. This is where I go to gain perspective. And I think that is really the trick, without necessarily having there be quick and easy tricks, because I don't think it is, and I don't want to put that forward. But I do think if you can gain perspective by being around certain people, holding certain conversations, going to certain places, having an outer body experience where you can be in the moment and say, am I doing the right thing right here? Do I want to be doing this? And constantly reset. If you have a laundry list of ways of resetting, you can apply them in the barrage of life, in the variety of situations that you're in. If you're able to figure out your triggers, you can gain perspective, you can reset. I think then you're on that journey to finding real, unadulterated joy. I'm not Marie Kondo, so I'm not talking about that kind of joy. But I'm talking kind of joy. Passion is applied. You are literally using the gift that you came to give professionally in that moment, more frequently, in all capacities of your life, whatever it is that makes you hum. And you all know it. Everyone has had that moment where they've been so in the moment because they're so content, and beyond that, they're happy and they're joyful inside themselves that they're doing what they're doing. You feel it, others feel it. And that process of finding that is continuous. You might have it for a pocket in your life. Some people had a phase of their career and they're constantly missing it and going back to it, but it changes and it morphs. And so it's that journey of constantly finding what it is that makes that true for you today. So I want to share a couple stories with you in this process. I asked one of my coaching clients, she's a CEO. I asked her that question. I said, what is it that triggers you in your relationships the most? She said, that's easy. I'm an emotional caretaker. And I was like, okay. And she goes, and honestly, that feels very prickly because, and it's, it feels prickly for her to do it well. And it's crowded because she's in there doing it while somebody else should be doing it for themselves. And so one of the things that we reimagined was how she could think about those boundaries that she's setting for herself. She hates the words boundaries. She thinks they're too rigid. She doesn't believe that work-life balance is real. She thinks it's an oxymoron. She's a culture builder and a caretaker of her team. And so to build a rigid barrier between her and her team was never something that was going to work for her. So we reimagined it as a living wall on both sides of that. One is her side, and she's got green, trees there. She's cultivating and caring for them. The other side of that is her team's side, and they're doing it for themselves. This was important for it to be a living, breathing, healthy imagery for her. Because when she walks around their side or she oversteps their side, she's in their turf, she's undermining their authority, and they're pushing back. Because obviously they want to be able to lead in their own right and apply their passions. And so that imagery helped her a little bit with a relationship for her team instead of it being overwrought with too much involvement on her side in their worlds. Another thing that she did, because she's an athlete, she started integrating these real quick walks. She just leaves the office and walks down by the water almost on a daily basis. I don't even think we've ever held a coaching call on Zoom. It's always over the phone so she can walk. Gaining perspective, resetting. That's the key. Another thing, a third thing that she came up with that she tried that has worked out really well for her is, in terms of finding joy, she loves the scientific conversations, loves being in them, loves contributing to them, loves having them. And her team was feeling she was overly involved in some of those conversations. And so we thought about, where's a venue where she can go? She's not going to be emotionally caretaking, and she can exchange those conversations with people that also find real joy and passion applying themselves in those conversations. So there's a bunch of CEO communities and forums, and she sought out 2 or 3 of those and joined them. And so now she's able to complete herself, lead with integrity, not overstep some of the boundaries, and catch that trigger of emotional caretaking by resetting. Another client I've got represents a really different type of trigger. I think for all of us as global citizens, we're in a time where the noise of the amount of information that's coming to us is overwhelming. People might be activists, they might be advocates for women's rights, they might be sensitive to and passionate about racial equality, gun violence. There's so many things going on that we have to attend to on a daily basis. And I would argue that's complicated for all of us at this point. However, when it's part of your job to synthesize that event and put a point of view around it that's going to be a message out from the CEO, you have to look at those events with a very different lens. And for one of my clients, that's the head of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, it's very important for her to lead with integrity, that there's a point of view or a voice or a stance taken in sharing that kind of message and information out. She was working with a CEO who wasn't willing, for understandable reasons, to always put that point of view out there. And that was a trigger for her. If we're just messaging, but we're not putting out a point of view, what are we doing, right? We're just contributing to the noise. And so she worked on working very closely with her CHRO, who she just wasn't lining up with, to figure out if that CHRO also had that feeling. And so instead of coming to the one-on-ones that she had with her litany of to-dos, and going through all the tactical, volume of work that they always have going on, she ended up kind of just relating to that CHRO and having an honest, candid, and frankly, private conversation about whether she was feeling the same way. And could they come together, being disappointed together in the fact that if a point of view wasn't being taken, and then working together to figure out how they can gradually evolve that person to think differently about their messaging and how they show up. So that's how she fixed that trigger of that relationship for herself. The way she gains perspective and resets is she is that person in the neighborhood who hosts movie night in her backyard. She's got a massive screen in her backyard. She's got lights with the cool light bulbs, strung all the way across her yard. There's a popcorn machine. I mean, she's literally doing it right. And the whole community gathers there with their sleeping bags, sit outside and watch movies. And in that process, she finds her perspective and she resets. The way she's sort of finding joy and has literally been to find very free spaces in her community where she can go and share her point of view, unbridled, right? Where she can say exactly what she wants to say and the way she wants to say it and give back to her community and create community at the same time. And so that for her has been absolutely the way that she has made sure that she has stayed applied in her passion, because her gift is getting others to deeply feel what she feels when she's speaking publicly. She's one of those people that when she speaks, you're right in the pocket with her and you feel the same thing that she's sharing. And so across these different situations, because I really do believe it's different for everyone. Their triggers are different, how they gain perspective is different, how they reset is different, and obviously how they apply their passions is quite different as well. The mindset that I think we could be in is to consciously reintegrate. If you think about the word reintegrate, all the facets of your life are pulling you apart. You're disintegrating in different pieces. And to lead and live with integrity, you have to hone all of that in and make it feel like it's coming together so that you can be at your best in the moment. And I think this process of consciously reintegrating is one way for us to think about it as we're doing this on a daily basis. And as we're doing this, especially in the moments that matter, if we've become numb from the burnout, given the barrage of life. I think what I'd like to do is sort of leave you with a couple of things that you can keep in mind. And one of those is identify, and recognize or work on the awareness of what those relationship triggers are for you. Another one is to think about, how do you gain perspective to reset? What is that thing that makes you stop and second guess if you're taking something personally that you don't need to be taking personally? If you're grateful in the right ways that you need to be, or thankful, if you're present, and how do you reset? What is your laundry list of resetting? Work on one, get one for yourself so you can do it daily. You can do it in the moment. You can do it weekly, monthly, all of those things. And I think if you do those things and you think about consciously reintegrating yourself when you're put off balance, you are going to be in that process, which is continuous, to find real joy for yourself and to apply the passions so that you can share your gift for yourself and for others. And so hopefully these are helpful ways for you to think about this as you lead and live in the garage of your life.
Thank you so much, Cailin. Thank you for giving us so much food for thought. We have a couple of questions in chat, but before I go to those, I'm going to selfishly take the time and ask you one question that bubbled up based on what you shared. And one of my key takeaways from what you shared is integrity is living in alignment with your values. And all of us are individuals, we're different, we have our own set of values, organizations have their own set of values. In your experience, from your perspective, how can leaders lead with integrity, live with integrity, when their own personal values might be in conflict with the values of the system that they work in, or even the values of the people that they work with?
I think that's where, if I'll go back to constantly gaining perspective to reset, so you have the energy to bring forward the right strategy to shift it and to evolve it. And it may not happen as fast as you want it to. It may take really candid conversations. It may take you finding the right way through that person. I believe there's always a way through. And so, but it may not be a way that you have practiced, exercised, that's as authentic for you naturally. And so pushing yourself, stretching yourself to find a way through, I think, is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Cailin. We have a few more questions. I'm going to start with the first question. The first question is from Randy. Is real joy similar to the state of flow that others talk about?
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, I don't want to say it depends, because I think that for some people that is true. As a personal example, my son talks a lot about the state of flow. He's an electric guitar player. And there's nothing that touches him when he's in the middle of music. I think you could define it that way the more I think about it out loud, if that works for you. If you find your flow, you're in the moment, you're in your groove, and all parts of you are focused in that moment, then I think that's fine. I think that works.
Great, thank you. The next question is from Viswa. Sometimes personal relationships have hard stops, and that impact the work-life balance for leaders, employees, and stress out deeply. How and what are the areas that I'm assuming it's leaders need to start focusing to reset back to be on track?
So what's your read of that question, Salima, in terms of hard stops? What do you think that might mean? Just so I'm answering the right question.
Yeah, I think what they're trying to ask is that, there's some certain non-negotiables that we run into when we're into relationships. That's what I'm thinking, right? And Viswa, please, if you have any edit clarification, feel free to type it in chat. But that's how I'm interpreting it. And that impact your relationship, it impact your work-life balance, that can add stress. So what are the things that you can do to reset your focus back on track?
I think, oftentimes when there are non-negotiables, that process of slowing down so they're not swept under the rug is important. There's such a high volume of work. But if you've got a culture crusher, then stepping back to reset and gain perspective on how to fix that or how to manage amidst it, right? So if there's a rock in the middle of that river, how are you going to go around it? Mm-hmm. And the strategy to how to go around it in the day-to-day is different from the strategy of, moving it out of the river. And you probably need both at all levels so that you're able to do now in the present, but you're able to focus more long-term about how you might eradicate some of those hard stops that are unhealthy culturally for people personally or beyond.
Work through it and then also put in the work to remove it for the future.
100%. That's the finding the passion part. If there's something viscerally wrong, that's a hard stop that you can't move, how do you find the passion to have a completely different approach or tactic to it?
Absolutely.
Yep.
We have I think it's a comment and a question. Lori, please feel free to clarify. Lori wrote, beautiful. How do you, I'm assuming it's a question, how do you do it personally for yourself? And then she said, so impressed. So I guess the question is, how are you practicing it for yourself, Cailin?
I think the laundry list of resets for me has been incredibly important and helpful in the barrage of my life, right? So part of the gaining perspective for me is this, it's sitting where I am, it's this background, it's being somewhere where the outside nature and privacy and calms me, because I'm a person as a former academic that can be in my head a lot. And sometimes I need to shift to my heart. And how do I get myself someplace like this that does that for me so I can lead with integrity myself? And so this is one of the places that I reset.
Beautiful. Thank you. We still have 3 more minutes remaining. So if you have more questions, please feel free to put it in chat. In the meantime, I have another question, Cailin. Oftentimes I hear the words leading with honesty, leading with authenticity, and leading with integrity, and they're used kind of interchangeably. I'm curious to hear your perspective on the relationship between these three, I think, distinct things, right, when it comes to leadership and leading.
I'm really fascinated by sort of the paradox of authenticity. I think, because I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area and tech is predominant here, when the toxic positivity work came out, it really did hit a grain of truth. Some of the clients that I coach will say, well, that's not me. That's not authentic for me. And I'll say, well, it is, but it might feel fake for a while until you practice that new way of managing across the trigger that provokes you. It's not natural to not want to emotionally caretake for the emotionally caretaker. It feels like holding back. It's exhausting in that process when you're making the change. But to not give yourself the benefit of the doubt that you are going to feel more authentic when it's practiced on the other side of it probably shortchanges you. I think that's one of the things that comes up to mind for me when you talk about the difference between authenticity and integrity. You can hold integrity, but feel a little fake in the process of growth.
Yeah. Very good. Well, we are almost out of our time. We have no more questions in chat. Thank you so much, Cailin, for sharing this amazing pearls of wisdom on this extremely important topic. For me, one of my big takeaways is that integrity is not just a virtue. In this day and age, in the VUCA world, it's a strategic imperative, both for individual leaders as well as organizations. And I think you've made a really great case for that today. Thank you so much for your time and for your knowledge that you've shared with us today.
Thanks for having me. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.